Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Thank you so much. Not so sure about the mic. Well, aren't you lucky students? So you first have to have this long class or whatever you were doing before this, and now you have to sit here for 70 minutes? Very strong, very strong. Yes, exactly. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, I better not make it not boring then. So one more question. Is this being shared right now already? It is shared. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. So can you see this? No, probably they can. That's super big. Really have to use the mic? Okay. So thank you for coming. And hopefully later, thank you for not falling asleep, although I will understand probably. There we go. Please don't. Right. So my name is Gwen, and here we're going to talk today about critical discourse analysis, what it is and how it can be used as a tool for analyzing social media. And we'll take you through all of these things. First, though, I want to present a very useful student textbook by some really brilliant authors. I'm joking, it's me. Which actually introducing this because all that I'm going to tell you today, if you're interested in this, is being described in this book, plus a number of other methods. We also, mainly look at social media data, but also other data is being discussed. It is really useful for students because it provides a step-by-step kind of model for you to apply CDA, but also other qualitative methods, just multimodal language and so on. And you can find it there. Yeah. Let's go for it. Yeah. I'm just grateful I don't have to do the technical part today. No, you're welcome. All right. So it was recording. I don't have to do my buy this book pitch. Okay. Buy the book. It's very good. That's why I wanted to say. And you can find it there. My other work, and now is good news, is available free online. But these are mostly empirical analyses. So it's examples, if you will, of CDA and multimodal analysis being applied to data sets. I'm just showing you this because I think it might be of interest to you if you want to see how it's been done so far. What it's like. Now, what are we doing today? First try to explain to you what CDA is and what it can do for you, for me, on social media especially. We'll look at the origins of CDA and see where it's evolved from. And then we'll also talk about what ideology has to do with this and how especially social media is very useful for shifting of discourses as our world changes. So lots of that. We'll then go on and explain what makes social media stand out and why it is useful to understand our society. Basically, it's freely provided, freely accessible, up-to-date information about what kind of discourses are circulating amongst people. Now, throughout, we consider the nature of CDA, and we especially focus on the applied kind of CDA that I tend to do in my research. We'll also look at a number of posts. So it's not just me talking. Well, it is still me talking, but we'll also together do some analysis, which I hope is fun. And I'm sorry for that typo. I hope that at the end of this, you'll come out with a bit of a starter tool of how you can apply CDA yourself. And we end, if we get there, by dissecting a CDA project that you can then possibly also do. So, CDA in social media, what can it do? Well, first off, it allows you, it's just a tool. It's not something amazing. It's just a tool that allows you to find details in language use in and across social media posts. Normally, when we're posting on social media, I see this all the time when we're in the metro, you know, everyone's like on their social media and playing games and so on. But we don't tend to do this very attentively. Even when we post something or we read something that's part of a feed, we don't look at details. But this is something that CDA can do. It allows you to denaturalize certain meanings that are carried by language in these posts. So in other words, it allows you to put on your detective hat and go and dig around in the words and the grammar used. Now, before we have a little go at such an analysis, here I want to show you a clip of a woman. This woman is in Canada. And why am I showing you this? Because in the first part of our talk, we'll look at some of these posts that were made about her as she, unfortunately had a very off day, must have been. And she went to a diner with her husband, and there was a bunch of Syrian men sitting next to her. And she became very suspicious of these men because they were talking a strange language, not English or anything, imagine. And she had the impression they were talking about her. And so she went on a rant, a racist rant. And this was then, of course, taped by a camera on someone's phone, and they posted it online. And what happens when something posted online? It gets to Twitter, and Twitter went absolutely viral, and the hashtag Kalipocha was born. Now, let's see if I can share this. I do new share. There we go. Okay. Oh, there's definitely
no.
Shut your fucking mouth then. Because you know what? You're dealing with a Canadian woman right now, and I will leap across the table and punch you right in the fucking mouth. Holy fuck. Well, that's your fucking country. We don't need you here. You know what? Excuse me?
Yes, respect. Don't say like that.
Relax.
We also
Excuse
need
me?
relax.
Excuse
Don't
me?
take
I
it
was
like that.
born and raised
You
here.
relax.
I am Canadian.
You relax. It doesn't matter. We're all Canadians.
No,
You relax.
you're not Canadian.
Yes, we're all
No,
the same.
you are not
You're a
Canadian.
human being. I'm a human being.
You
There's
are not
nothing
Canadian.
special about you.
No, you are not Canadian.
It does not matter.
You know
That's
what?
what you say.
Good for you.
Well, good for you
Do you
too.
pay taxes here, my friend?
Fucking of course I pay
You
taxes.
pay taxes?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You pay taxes?
Yes. Everybody fucking pays taxes.
Oh, everybody pays
Yes.
taxes, really?
Yeah.
You're not dealing with one of your Syrian bitches right now. You're dealing with a Canadian woman, and I'm not going to be talked down
Well,
to
you're the
by
one who
you.
turned around and talking to me.
I'm not going to be talked down to by you.
I
Why are
saw
you being
you
so
staring at
racist?
him.
Why are you being so
Oh, all of a
racist?
sudden I'm being racist.
Yes.
I'm Canadian, so I'm racist.
Okay, we can call the
You know
cops
what?
right
You
now.
guys need to go back to where you
Okay,
came
we can
from.
call the cops right now.
I was born and raised here.
We were.
You
I
fucking right.
respected you first, and I didn't talk with you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
No, excuse me?
Shut up.
You don't fucking own this country.
This is my
Dickhead.
country. This is my country.
No, it's not your country.
It is my
No,
country.
it's not your
I need to call the
country.
cops. I need to call the cops.
Okay, I think we get the gist of it. Basically, there's lots of anger and, yeah, she says some unfortunate things. Unfortunate because they are in fact pretty racist, but also not as uncommon, sadly, as we might think. So why did I show you this again? Because we are going to look at the reaction that we saw to this on Twitter. Now, this is just one of the posts. We'll look at a number of them. And herein, the user says, one of the many reasons I love Canada is their respect for diversity, but every country has a Kalipocha. And then there's a retweet of the news flash, because yes, it didn't just go big on Twitter, it made it into the news. Kalipocha got fired, then she got rehired. We'll get to that later. Anyway, CDA here is a very useful tool because it allows us to look at what participants are represented in language, in any statement really, and what are they shown as to be doing. So if we see, he's got a very positive evaluation there of Canada, right? He says, oh, I love Canada and they have respect for diversity. But, you know, using this there, you already see he's signaling an opposition to her. Every country has a Kelly Pocha, so he's kind of, we are not you. Canada's great, you're different. But not just that, it also seems to be missing details here. This every country, really? Does every country have races? For example, Nigeria or Yemen, where they have these big ethnic conflicts, is that the same thing? So, you know, whenever there's details like this missing, it's a chance for CDA to show us what is really going on, if you will. As I already said, he seems to be defending Canada in saying, well, Canada has respect for diversity, but there's this bad apple, you know, there's this odd person out who is just a racist type, nothing to be done. Well, actually, that's quite interesting because, you know, it's this opposition and saying, oh, it's just an exception. It also means that we don't have to kind of go and look at why she's saying the things she's saying. But in any case, this go home what she said, and you're not Canadian, you go back to your own country. Sadly, that is quite a common kind of discourse that we mostly hear from right-wing politicians. They're the ones against immigration, and the Nazis, they were right-wing. So I'm not saying they're Nazis, I'm just saying that right-wing, that's right-wing. So this is to be drawn on then by often disadvantaged kind of people in local people who may be unemployed or maybe, how do you say it, fighting for the, not fighting, but what's the word? Who may be in competition with newly arrived migrants for the few resources that there are in a society. And then they're almost tutored to blame migrants for the kind of problems that they have. Now, from a critical linguistic perspective, what is notable here is that pronoun, their respect, yeah? Because who is that there? It's kind of like a broad and undefined category, and it's erected here to say, oh, well, actually, it's erected here to align you, or whoever is reading this, to love Canada along with this user. Because, you know, it's often used by politicians, say in America, who say, we Americans fight for freedom. That's usually a signal that they want to mobilize support for, you know, some kind of military intervention somewhere, because we Americans, who is this we exactly? I mean, America is always like a melting pot of diverse people, but now it's we Americans coming to the American bosom. Let's all support the war on whatever their next war is. So typical what we see here, if you will. Now we'll come back to this, this example and other tweets. Now, CDA tends to focus on language use in context. All kinds of instances can be approached this way. It allows us to look at what kinds of ideas and assumptions are carried in the statements about, you know, the same everyday kind of tweets or posts, as well as those that are overtly political. So if you want to do CDA, you don't necessarily have to go to feeds that are really discussing politics. No, ideology can be found in very everyday topics. In, you know, moms talking about something, can be in fitness influencers, as we will see later, and it can be here where we're talking about racism. In any case, CDA also considers the wider, meaning social, political, and economical context, because language is intertwined, with all these. We cannot make sense of things without language. So rather than other tools where sometimes we don't look at context, in fact, it is very important for CDA to be aware of context. And when these instances of communication that we're looking at were, you know, came to be. Now, CDA started quite recently in the 1980s and 90s when there was, from linguistics, where there was quite an interest in how language plays a role in functioning of our societies. So he considered the role of language in how events were represented in ways that support the views of the powerful in society. So in other words, if someone is drawing on a certain discourse, CDA will ask, well, in whose, the views that are expressed, the model of the world that is being expressed here, in whose interest is that? Whose interest does it serve? So discourses also allow certain kinds of injustices to take place and to happen, or to be maintained, because they, we don't notice them immediately. But as we said, CDA can denaturalize what is actually being said. It was designed to detect such motivated interests at more subtle levels in language that would be less obvious to the casual observer. Let's look at the kinds of data and examples of topics that are suitable for CDA. Well, traditionally, CDA looked a lot at newspaper texts, political speeches, school books, policy documents, and so on. And there it tended to look at how buried assumptions can be revealed. The same as we're going to be doing today, but then with social media. Here are some examples of topics that CDA has tackled, but there's so many. So, how racist ideologies are maintained in news media, how politicians gain support for wars that are related to actually, gaining access to natural resources. This piece of mine was about Libya, which was hailed as a people's uprising. That's right. It was all about the people, and then there were visuals to kind of support this, with people with Kalashnikovs going and in rags, going, hey, so down with Gaddafi. But actually what it was about is just, Europeans trying to get access to oil and resources. It's quite interesting. Also how sometimes terrible acts of Western global corporations are justified, or how sexism and discrimination can be highly subtle. You can detect that with CDA. Another very interesting number of studies look at the privatization of public institutions such as school and hospitals. When something like this happens, it's not actually in the interest of people. It's in the interest of these institutions more profitable, so money can. It's not in the public interest. So Leiden Imagine looked at that. So it's a close analysis of a single tweet. It allows to show language between society and politics. We see that there's an assumption really, and the assumption is that racism is not infused in society in complex ways. So that means if it's just this one type, yeah, if every country has a Karipoka, Pocha, it's just her, and we can just say, oh, well, we are good. So because it's only one woman, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to interrogate ourselves or our society because, she's just a racist type. She's a bigoted Canadian mother. And there you go. So actually what this tweet is doing, it's not helpful if you talk about racism in that way, because now we're just saying it's just her. She's just a racist type, and we don't have to actually do anything or look at ourselves or look at our society. It serves the maintenance of racism and favors those who presently benefit from this situation of inequality. There was a whole Twitter storm about this, yeah, and about this racist trend. And it was mostly focused on this woman and how she was bad and she was a folk devil, basically. And at the end, do you think something changed? Something positive changed for people of color? Not really, no. Oh, yes, I was supposed to say my notes, that, yeah, because of this, because of the focus on her speech and her behavior, that, that was really, if you will, deleted from this. It was just like, look, she's a racist type. She's just a bad apple. And we can't chase that because there's one in every country. So we don't have to look further. And, there was no asking about her context. In fact, there was a kind of clear reason that we couldn't look at the context because there was no pardoning what she said. And therefore, we couldn't interrogate why she was drawing on this kind of particular set of ideas. Now, why social media? I've noticed that it's not so popular here yet, where in the West, a lot of academics are looking at social media. It marked a real change in our societies to have people be able to talk to other people, as funny as it sounds. Because in traditional media, we would watch a television or read a newspaper, and it would talk down to us. And we couldn't talk back, not really, unless you sent a letter to the editor or something, fairly inconvenient. So what we got there was one-way communication, which really carried top-down elite ideologies. Because after all, who has enough money to, have a news organization or to own a newspaper? I don't. So my ideologies weren't transmitted there. Rather, we saw a lot of, people who already are in powerful elite positions in society who could then, transmit their ideas, if you will. And they were then, clearly in function of legitimizing their interests of these people, and to maintain the kind of social relations that were favorable to this class of people. Now, social media really changed that, or at least we thought it could change that, because here we had people talking to people, right? Everyone could now participate. You just have to have a phone and you can go and produce your own set of meanings and opinions online. We could also have cross-platform interactions and everyone could talk to everyone. So we could now hear marginalized voices we could never hear before. So bottom-up discourses, this is a fantastic way to access these for us academics and for all of you. We could also ask how, at this point, these ideologies are reproduced, challenged, and modified by normal people. But importantly here, social media platforms actually feed back into traditional media. In other words, news sources, social media opinions. I'll go deeper into that here. So I did a study about 2 women, and they were from Ireland, and they wanted to do an abortion. Now, not so very long ago, this was completely not possible. It's a very Catholic society, and you couldn't have an abortion. So they had to travel to the UK, which is just across the water, not very far. But this is very inconvenient, of course. If you're there, you're with unwanted child, you don't want to have to travel this. So these 2 women documented their trip, and they mentioned the Prime Minister in every post, which means he gets like a message every time they post something. So for a whole, oh, what's this now? Is it going to explode in 2 seconds? What do I do? Oh, I was expecting something more exciting to happen there with the counting down. All right, so they documented their trip. They had images of taxis, of saying, brr, it's cold at the airport. We never see them. They're completely anonymous. So we don't know if they even existed, but okay. It went absolutely viral on Twitter in UK and in Ireland. And the news picked up on this. The news found this feed with the 2 women travel and reported on it like it was a majority opinion in Ireland. And now that's where the interesting thing is, because it might not have been. There was a lot of support for these women with love hearts and saying sisterhood and solidarity, but we don't even know if they were real. Yeah. So the news actually legitimized this as something real. It changed it. Not only did it give a megaphone position to these particular anti-abortion opinions, but it was also, it made it very clear that this is what people really think popularly. So yeah, it was then very clear about details in the feed, and there was lots of love and affect and emotions and buzzwords. Now, I've seen this happen here too. I get these expat news or whatever, and it's like, oh, netizens complained or the web reacted. And, one user said, why do I care what one user? Anyway, never mind. So it feeds back in the news. And secondly, it is very good. Or what were we talking about? Sorry. Oh, yes, social media. Social media is very good at allowing us access to shifts in power in a society, because we can see this through shifting discourses. So Fairclough, one of the founding fathers of CDA, said that power relations in a society are always part of a struggle. And there are always competing ideas and points of view in any society. Now, I have a lot of these examples, don't I? I used to live in Sweden, and Sweden tended to have this, how shall we say it, most of the way they talked about immigration, the way they understood immigration was from a very humane kind of discourse, where if we have enough resources in a society, of course we should share with other people, we should support other people. And so immigration was seen as something good. But then as of late, we see this shifting because more right-wing politicians started voicing ideas like, well, actually, you're competing with other Swedish people for resources, and migrants come in and they take this away, and they're a threat to our national culture. Of course, it's very interesting to talk about national culture because you're assuming there is such a thing as national culture or homogeneous. Anyway, the point is that through social media, we can see how this struggle is taking place because different people will come up with, come at certain topics with different discourses. And we see new perspectives gain prominence over others. And they will then come to define how we think about things, the priorities and the aims that shape what gets done and why. If you're wondering what that is, how things get done, well, now actually we've come so far in this shift in Sweden that they've elected a more right-sided political party. And so their views and their kind of discourses that they carry will then translate into policy, and slowly but surely Sweden will become a different country. So the tweets that we see there as well might be manifestations about a new way of thinking about immigration. So what we see in social media is the struggle. Okay. So in other words, to sum this up, why social media? Well, formerly CDA placed emphasis on these elite texts, as we've seen already, speeches, news texts. But my argument is very much we saw a lot of dominant ideology there. And it told us little about this struggle in our society, about power shifting. Now, social media does do that, yeah? It offers us this opportunity to see how these discourses are, challenged, are they negotiated, are different viewpoints come to the fore and are backgrounded. It also feeds into the news, whereby these new discourses might be legitimated in a kind of big way. And whereas mainstream news tended to present more negative representations of ethnic minorities, that is not what we see at all that is going on in social media. So these tweets as well could be examples of, different perspectives. So this one particularly, as you can see, it challenges this negative representation of ethnic minorities. It's saying, yeah, we're diverse, we love diversity. But at the same time, it is denying that there is a problem in Canada as a whole. So it's also maybe not super helpful. Now, CDA is based on a theory of language that is called social semiotics, which in itself is based, or at least has its origins in Saussurean semiotics. As you know, I'm sure you're familiar with semiotics in traditional way. Saussure argued that language and grammar are like building blocks through which people accomplish communication. So as a good structuralist that he was, he would try to understand the world by finding the bigger structure in things and then see how elements make up this structure, if you will. So he studied language in terms of its use, parole, and therefore tried to establish the underlying system, langue. What is important to remember here is that words have no natural relationship to the world. So they're arbitrary. They're signs that we agree on, right? It's very symbolic, if you will. So for example, if I say car or voiture or whatever it is in Chinese, dog is go-go. You see a dog, if you see a dog, it doesn't go, 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 go. It just, we know what it means because we've learned that it means, but it's an arbitrary relationship. So this thing there, yeah, it looks a bit like a shoe, but nevertheless, when you looked at it, you all knew that I meant car, probably. So, we have these agreements, right, about what words mean. Now, if we look at social semiotics, it fiddles with this. It kind of widens this, if you will. It says that signs don't have a fixed meaning. Rather, they have meaning potential. So it sees language not as, fixed meanings, like, oh, this is that, this is that. It sees it as a set of available choices. And when these different words are placed in different contexts, they might actually take on different meaning. So I have an example for that, but yeah, no, there we go. Words and combinations have the potential to mean particular things. So if we say, he is a man, needed a man. So yeah, if I say he is a man, that's purely descriptive, right? Because he's a man. But if I say, hey, be a man, then that is very evaluative, right? There is a meaning here to man. It's not just a label anymore. It actually carries views of masculinity. I mean, I have a brother, and I remember when he was little and he busted his knee and he was crying, and someone told him, oh, be a man. And it meant like, oh, toughen up. So, you know, it's you see how the word man comes to mean something different in a different context, I hope. So how can we detect ideology? That is really what CDA is looking for. Choices are loaded with meaning that reflect the ideas and power interests that dominate at the time of their use. So ideology here is the broader system of ideas and values. Man, in our example, isn't simply a label, but rather it comes with ideas and values about men's characteristics. Like, for example, this is what makes me happy about China. Sometimes I see a young couple, many things make me happy about China, but sometimes I see a young couple and they're wearing matching kind of sweaters and they both have teddy bears on their sweater. And I'm like, I like masculinity in China because it's okay. You know, you go to the West and when I come back, I go like, oh my God, they're so macho. And they're like, oh, you know, real difference here in masculinity. So the point is that man here is loaded with ideas, what that means, yeah? And they can be different. This kind of ideology, these values can be different in different social contexts. Like here, masculinity is something different than in the West, you could say. And they also belong to a particular moment in time. So let's have a look at some Weibo. As promised, the second part, we're still going to do some more analysis of our ranting racist in Canada. But just to give you an example of detecting some ideology, this is a rough translation, and I have to thank my neighbor, I think somewhat opposite to me in the hallway for this. She says something like, not literal, okay? She says, where there's a limit in your life, you have to break through. And she says, find yourself, constantly improve yourself. Ah, that sounds like a lot of effort to me. I'm not so sure. Maybe I'm okay. Why do we have to constantly improve ourselves? Isn't that interesting? Maybe we're fine the way we are. But that's not the kind of discourse she's drawing on. Really what we're hearing is this focus on improving yourself and breaking the limit and so on. It's something that became popularized in the end of the 20th and start of the 21st century. We had a whole spate of these self-help books that came out, and the ideas of self-discovery and pushing limits, yeah, that all got very positive evaluations, as it does have for this girl here. So excuse me, fitness here becomes like having a moral commitment to yourself. If you don't push your limits, then so what is very positive evaluation here. So what we are seeing here is consumer lifestyle culture, where we define ourselves through commodities and activities. The other day, I love my e-bike, okay? Yet another reason to love China. Here, my e-bike. I'm on my e-bike and I'm at a crossroads and this guy pulls up next to me and he's got a racing bicycle and he's got the full kit, you know, he's got helmet and he's got spandex on and he looks ready to go to a race, right? And he's got the sweater and the camelback so he can drink while he's in his race. And this is typical for consumer lifestyle culture. It's like you have to wear the right kit to do a certain activity. Now, I'm in the park, right? I also go to the park and I'm jogging in the park and oh yeah, I've got my kit on, right? But who comes there puffing the other way? A businessman. How do I know? Because he's in a full suit. He's actually wearing a suit and for lunch, rather than sleeping, he's decided he's going to run this track. And I'm like, what is he doing? But then I realized, how cool. That's great. He wasn't into consumer lifestyle culture. He was just jogging. So that is something that in the West, we've completely left behind us. We're seeing progressively more and more that if you want to do something, if you want to do some kind of sport, you have to have the kids. And where does that come from? Well, it's all the companies that are trying this capitalism, trying to make you consume more, right? So it becomes a lifestyle. And you can't do jogging anymore in a suit. Yeah, go guy running in a suit. So, you know, this idea of fulfilling your potential, that's also something we hear in branding culture. So it's the ideology of lifestyle consumer capitalism that is really making her come up with these things to say, you know, you have to break through, you have to improve yourself, you have to manage your full potential. What is my full potential? I don't know. Anyway, right. So to summarize, discourses are models of the world. Yeah, Foucault pointed that it provides an account of how things are. And it communicates a model of the world where there are prescribed views, traits, behaviors, attitudes, and norms. And it supports particular ideologies and power interests. In this case here, it supported the idea that racists are individuals around this, but they're not the norm. They're kind of like exceptions, okay? And this one, it had the idea that men have to be tough and assertive and definitely not wear sweaters with little teddy bears on. And in that case there, it was all about self-discipline and self-management being a way of life. Now, the kind of CDA that I do uses the notion, excuse me, the notion of discursive scripts. Discourses lay out ways of doing things which involve participants, events, places, times, and they then carry ideas, values, and evaluations. So so in the instance of communication, such as a post on Weibo or a post on, what's it called again? Instagram. It's my little red book. Little red book. There you go. Yeah. They all have these scripts, but they might not be immediately apparent. So we can use CDA to do the detective work of finding these out. So it represents a toolkit for CDA, where you go and look for the discursive scripts in instances of communication. Now, if you look at a post, you can say what kind of discursive script is being carried here. And then if you look across the feed, you can say, you know, and a feed could be one hashtag that you follow or multiple ones. You can try to figure out, is there a coherence here? Are people saying some of the same things? Or is there variation or even contradiction? And if so, why? Now, 2 points we always have to look at if we're looking for discursive scripts. The first one is, how are participants represented? And the second one is, what are they doing? Yeah, who are the actors? What are they doing? So if we look at how are participants represented, sorry, drink break. They may be represented either as individuals, a type, or a group. What's the difference there? Well, if it's individuals, we're giving a lot of extra information like personal details, there's context, there's possible insights into thoughts on how they feel. Like when the two women travel posted, it's cold. It helped to align us, to bring us closer to them because we were kind of drawn into their world. If we look then at this example, it's talking about the same thing. Look, the mob demonstrated against the government. The demonstrator at the front shouted abuse. You, am I pronouncing that correctly? You? Yeah. You stood as part of the demonstration, her daughter's hand firmly held in hers. She felt a combination of fear, joy, and anger. Okay, this is the same thing, right? All these 3 sentences. But in the first one, we're going to name the participants as a collectivized group. They're a mob. That's a negative evaluation. A mob is like a lynching mob, you know, from the cowboys. And this mob is demonstrating. So it's probably, we're not exactly encouraged to like what they're doing because they're a mob. Huh? So we're encouraged to align against them because of the negative evaluation. Now here, if we say the demonstrator at the front shouted abuse, this demonstrator is almost faceless. It's just one of a kind. It's a type. So the script stays quite neutral. It doesn't encourage us to have a positive or a negative alignment. Whereas with the person here, we're giving so much information. We know their name. Do we know that they have a daughter? So we feel, you know, they're more personable. And then we get insight into their thoughts and how they feel. So we are very much encouraged to align with her. So going on what you're trying to, how you're trying to talk about the event, if you use one or the other, you're actually manipulating the reader to have a certain stance towards the events that are being talked about. Now, if we see this here, there's actually was my impression, quite a lot of middle class people posting here. because, elitism almost, because racism is accounted for in terms of people being dumb. If we look at the green there, they're Hicks, they're rubes, they're white trash. Yeah, she is white trash, Filipocha. And if you talk like that, you're definitely dumb as well. It were them darn foreigners not talking Canadian. What did it? Yeah, it doesn't sound very intelligent, right? So, in other words, the participants here are, is Kelly Pocha in the first place. She's white trash. She's dumb. She's like a hick or a rube, like the people who buy the cars from her. So it's linked to particularly impoverished regions in Canada, if you will. And, it's not helpful because it doesn't make it necessary for us to think about why she said what she said or why she chose the words and the kind of discourse that she did. There's no need to investigate that because she's dumb. Yeah, that says it all. So it kind of sidelines why that was the words that she chose. Other people just call her a type. Here she's a type. She's aggressive, disrespectful, ignorant, bigoted, white woman with entitled superiority. She's a racist. I still don't know what that stands for. She's an obnoxious racist. Because she is this type, once again, we're not invited to think about what racism here, where it comes from, or why it is being manifested by her. There's no concept. She's just dumb or she's a racist type. Now, there's some other participants mentioned as well. There's parents and children and Cranbrook Dodge. Remember that she was fired? Well, they then rehired her. Oh, and then Cranbrook Dodge got it in their necks. But we'll get to that. The parents here, she is being said, well, I'm not like her. She's a bad parent, and I would teach my children right. So there, it's about her having the wrong attitudes and being a bad parent. That's why she's a racist. So it also doesn't really address much else there. Cranbrook Dodge, that's quite interesting because they then rehired her. They they were sided with the bad guy, I won't say, but it's the bad girl in this case. It's almost like there's two oppositions here. There's the we, from which we see we've dealt with them, and them is the other people. So the kind of personal pronouns that we see coming back is also typical for CDA detective work to look at, because it creates an opposition. It makes certain people good and certain people bad. In fact, what we are seeing here is the ideological square, which Van Dyck theorized about. He said that a script can carry sharp binary opposition. So we have a we, us, ours versus a they, them, theirs. Yeah. And all things positive about the them will be mitigated and turned into, interpreted as bad. So there's nothing that if you're on the other side of the ideological square, there's nothing good you can do. If you're on the us side and the we, anything you do, even if it's negative, it will still be interpreted as good. So the script basically explains what has happened in a simple good versus evil kind of, yeah? It creates an antithesis between these two. So users posting on feeds with hashtags appear to create a kind of shared mental representation of a perpetrator, the bad person on the other side. The perpetrator is the boundary of the ideological square and can therefore have all manner of evil traits and associations loaded onto them through the mental representation of them being the antithesis of their own morality. So we get a we. This is basically what happens on these typical cancel culture feeds. We get a we, and we are going to stand up and take the moral high ground, and we're going to tell them they're racist bastards, and we are righteous, and we will stand up for the people of color and be respectful, and we're going to stick it to the racists as well, because, after all, they'll never talk back to you, right? If you post something like, oh, bitch, we don't want you in Canada, I don't think she's going to reply. So it's very easy to do that. Huh? So we have a clear ideological score here. And we see that here. For example, we all know or have met a Kelly Pocha. We've dealt with them. But who is this we exactly? Have you met a Kelly Pocha? Have I? Huh? It doesn't matter. It's such a broad and undefined category that it kind of makes this imagined group that gives you more power. It aligns you as a reader. It aligns you to whatever opinion this person is selling. Yeah, and we're against them. As parents, we teach our children. No, am I? I guess I am. But what is really giving this away from a CDA perspective is the use of personal pronouns. They're typically used in the expression and manipulation of social relations. After all, if say, we are greatly enjoying this talk, then there's nothing really more you can say, is there? Because I've already said it for you. You're now aligned to whatever I feel. So it can be used to create compelling yet undefined categories of shared purposes, interests, and identity, which can conceal much difference, complexity, and contradiction. Now, as I said, first we look for the participants, then we look for what they are represented as doing. So what actions and processes are represented? Who is the agent of these actions? We can ask, to what extent are they represented clearly or through abstractions and symbolism, perhaps? And then what actions and processes are missing? Because we always look what is there, but if something is not there or if something is backgrounded, that's also very important to notice. So if we once again look, no one likes Kelly Pocha here. No. She is clearly the actions that she's doing are all very, she's being arrogant, because after she went viral and everyone kind of condemns her, what does she post? I believe those men deserved everything I said to them. Go back to Syria. Wow, throwing some oil on the fire. And then, as the Twitter storm rages on and the lynching mob gets her fired, she comes up with an apology. So then she said, I'm a hardworking mother of but then, because she's on the other side of the ideological square, no one accepts this. They see this as a basis for evaluating her character as ingenuine, making excuses, hashtag sorry, not sorry, not really, we're just trying to get off. And look in this great composition there where they've actually pasted her apology and they juxtapose it with this hardworking mother of three lying drunk on a toilet seat. Yeah. And so there's lots of examples of that as well in the feed. But what we get here, what was I supposed to say? So these feed focuses really on character assassination, if you will. They question her overall integrity, her authenticity. And, they say, well, you're denying what you did now, and you're looking for excuses, and you're insincere. So that we, however, we tweeting, we have the moral high ground, right? Because we represent ourselves as good parents, and we are showing respect for people of color, and also showing their smartness, actually, by making fun of her and making these kinds of fun compositions, and sometimes creating memes and GIFs, which makes it a joke. In fact, the more joke you can bring to this, the more almost credit you're going to get from the rest of the people posting, because, hey, how smart are you? Not only are you righteous and morally correct, but also, you're quite funny. So it's sarcasm, very expensive, if you will. Okay, now, how about doing a project? I have no idea what time it is. No. Oh, we'll just carry on. So if we then want to do a project with CDA, how do we even start about that? Well, like I said, actually in my last talk, a problem that I've noticed, not just here, but for many young scholars, is that they start at the wrong end. They start with data. They go like, ooh, how about I take some data and I look at my data and I find what's there. No. But then you're like an unguided missile. Even, colleagues of mine have done this in other institutions. You have to start from an idea. Yeah, you have to start from something you're interested in. And I was interested in Chinese society because there's so much to learn for me. I was also interested in social media because that's what I do. Yeah, it's kind of a central tenet in my work. And at that time, I was living in Hangzhou. I was at a different university, and I was doing a lot of fitness. Yeah, went to the gym every day. And I noticed that people were wearing a lot of very cool kits and all of that. And it piqued my interest. And I said, well, how is this fitness business talked about online? That would be interesting. So I started reading up a bit about it. And I found that fitness was as a topic was that there was a growing interest in China, and that a lot of the values there, a lot of the fitness idea was imported from the West. And then I thought, well, who is really leading conversations about fitness? Influencers, right? Not just to sell products and clothing, but also selling a lifestyle in much of these things. So lifestyle, society, I thought we're onto something here. So then I went to look at Weibo and sell what I could find. So Weibo is a kind of combination, I feel, of Twitter and Instagram, but I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. So something very important before you start anything, even looking at your data, is that you have to have a research question. CDA should try to answer a research question. And it's often used to look at how a text represents something, like a particular topic, like a war or some event, a riot perhaps, and then draw out the discourses that people are using to express what they feel about this. In this, then, we look for what kind of identities, actions, and evaluations are involved. Now, if you don't have this link with a body of research literature, you're like an unguided missile. You don't know what's already been done. You don't know what people already have found out about this. And that then also, if you do find out, it allows you to know what you're going to be looking for in your text. So good scholarship, first, places its analysis against a thorough search of existing work on the topic. Yeah. And secondly, it draws on the collective established knowledge for help to ask the right kinds of research questions and to understand what we are seeing in our data. My last talk, I gave this example of someone who'd done corpus linguistics plus CDA, or at least made an attempt at doing that. And they had started from the data, and it was, you could see it in the whole project, and it didn't in the end make any contributions. It did a fantastic corpus linguistics study analysis, but in the end it wasn't able to say anything about so what your findings. This is what you found in the context, in the content of this text. So yeah, that's why we always have to start from literature. Okay, in this case, my research question was, how do these young Chinese women understand the newly arrived fitness culture in terms of CDA? What discursive script do they have for talking about this? So you see, the literature allowed me to frame this question. If I hadn't looked at the literature, I wouldn't have known some of these things. They also will allow me, in our subsequent analysis, to draw out what is actually going on in these posts, because I will recognize certain things that are already in the literature. We don't have to start from scratch. You know, you don't see data and then you look at data without knowing anything around it. That is not really working. So literature, yes. See, who are the main users of Weibo, right? That's something I want to know because I want to know who is posting here. Literature told me that there's newly emerged middle class in China that are attracted to and have the spending power for Western style products and fashion. In fact, these are used to actually kind of almost signify that you're chic, that you're modern, and that you have a sophisticated, what's the word? A sophisticated taste. There you go. The products signify being modern and chic, such as wine, coffee, clothing, lifestyle choices, such as fitness or hiking. And mentioning these by these influencers brings them, you know, shows that they have high cultural capital. So the users are characteristics of those posting on this topic on Weibo, I found, because that is exactly one of the things I noticed in the data. Secondly, I wanted to know who these influencers were specifically and what motivated them. Well, I found that there were also younger middle-class women who then participate in this. And this is accompanied by a form of Western individualism. There was a lot of striving, as we will see, and it was all about developing yourself and managing yourself. Now, traditional China, excuse me. Traditionally in China, we will have Confucianism, right? And Confucianist values. So in Confucianism, women will be more cast in like roles in relation to duty, and you know, you're in a family context and you are subservient to kinship. You have to know your place. You have a lot of duty. Yeah, beauty. That's what I've understood so far and through the literature. Now, because of globalization, actually, scholars have noticed that these typically Chinese values are making way for the promotion of Western consumer culture and neoliberalism. So maybe soon we won't see that guy jogging in his, in his suit anymore. He'll have to change now before he can do the jogging. Just joking, I hope not. So what kind of identities are evaluated as good? Now, as I already said here, this Western consumer culture and neoliberalism, I probably would do well in talking a little bit about neoliberalism. We see this more and more, especially in the United States, where the state is actually withdrawing from supporting citizens. We see capitalism cycling through all of society, where even people are being turned into commodities. And we're all free to, we are products ourselves, yeah, and we're competing against each other. And we have to strive for our own success in the job market, but also in everything else. So everything becomes treated in this way through this market logic. Yeah, we have to improve ourselves. We have to work on our beauty, on our careers, and we have to strive for things. All parts of life are also to be managed like children, for example. They're definitely a management product. Yeah, and we have to buy the right things and be seen to say the right things. And the child is to do well in school and so on. So all of this needs a lot of commitment, and it's a focus on competition, and that will ensure our happiness and success. So we also find that in this fitness culture online. It aligns with this neoliberal idea in Western societies, where there's a focus on managing a female's body through regulated workouts and diets. Some examples are this Ortofoletti, who talks about power femininity, if you're interested in this, and Walkerdine, who talks about kind of go-getting, striving for success, assertiveness. It's an attitude you should have. So health and fitness become another symbol in neoliberal ideology, of course, of self-control, self-discipline, and willpower. Fitness is no longer about health or working out. It's a way of life. It's a lifestyle. Okay, now, armed with that, we have to go and collect data. How much data? How long is a string, right? Well, in this case, 5,000 Weibo posts were collected in 2020 and 21 from the accounts of female fitness influencers. I'll talk about which female influencers in a moment. Some of these had a lot of followers, more than 100,000, which, for the West would be amazing. Others actually had less. It's okay if you have these kinds of things in your project. It's okay to have this. You just have to be clear and open about your research and the decisions you take. Now, our aim was to understand what discourses we found in these posts on fitness. So everything was imported into Envivo software, which is a qualitative analysis sort of software for language. But it was also painstakingly copied and pasted into Word. Sometimes people don't understand here. They go, oh, you use CDA. How can you take on so many posts? A lot of work. You have to read all of these, you have to get to know your data. I read them and then I read them again. I read them on the metro, when other people are enjoying themselves with their social media, and I'm sitting there reading data. So a lot of graft is the answer to that one, yeah? If you have them into a Word document, you can constantly take them with you while you're having lunch. Why don't you just read through them, getting to know your data? It's very typical for interpretative sort of analysis, which as a method CDA is a part of. Then the data was in the first instance analyzed using Van Dijk's semantic macro analysis. Now this sounds chic, but all you're really doing is looking at the main themes. So you see, what are main themes here that are coming back and what are the links between them? And different posts tend to carry different elements and combination of such themes. You will then find them back. I'm sure there was something I was supposed to say about data. Let's look at my... Oh yeah, I had to say, oh yes, for Kalipocha, that's right. What were the themes for Kalipocha? Well, first of all, there was a lot of personal pronouns. There was a lot of feeling of us versus her. There was many references to her as illiterate, can't spell, can't read, she's dumb, or she was a racist type, where she was a folk devil and racism became personalized in her, excuse me. So these observations we can get through by looking and reading your data again and again and looking at it through the lens of CDA. So you sort them in in thematic categories, and then you progressively, that reveals the kind of linguistic details that you see. So it's really a process of getting to know your data, and then the themes become apparent as you go through them again and again. And that can lead to revealing these discursive scripts that I talked about, which, may at first glance not be so obvious at all. Now, hashtags. Zapavinha has said that hashtags can be a really good basis of sampling. So we started off with something really straightforward. Fitness, yeah? For fitness influencers, seems logical. So these hashtags comprise linguistic conventions for the communities in which we have an interest. How do we find more than one? Well, we can see which ones are associated with this. We did two-phase sampling following Schiffman, where we saw who was using the hashtag fitness and then created a list of the top 20 influencers. Then we screened these trending posts on each of these influencers' profiles, and we found the other hashtags that they most used. So in the end, we created our sample by taking the top set of posts from each influencer using those hashtags. So it is important. That's why we're using this form of, I wouldn't call it, it's thematic analysis, really. So it's important to have a first step here, because CDA can only take on that much data. So you have to know where to look. And that is something that another method can actually help you with. If you can give representative examples of, look, this is a typical example for where this team, this is a typical example for this team, and then you can use CDA to go and really dig deeper into this. So the themes provided by these hashtags were seen as interrelated and constituent of the ongoing discussion within Weibo fitness influencer community. Okay. So our analysis, once again, as we said before, we're going to look at how people are represented, what actions are included or excluded, and how these actions are evaluated and what the states of mind are that we find. Okay, so if we apply that then as a means of analysis, we find that a lot of women were expressing being independent. That was very important. Yeah, so we have a lot of women comment directly about other people controlling them. That could be, maybe a child sometimes, but mostly it was family. Yeah, where fitness then became a part of challenging this. For example, the girl on the right, she said, "My outfit on the way to ballet class, bodysuit and shorts. Before the class, I only have to change to short tights and start dancing. When I wore a camisole when I was young, other parents always disrespect and disparage me. Now no one can discipline me." She's independent now. So it's like she uses fitness as a challenge to, be independent, to stand on her own feet, to do what she wants to do. But nevertheless, we do see in this other post a bit of a lack of confidence, perhaps, because she actually signals that there's a lot of social pressure on her. And she's not typical, the white young, how do you say it again? My by Joe, Jesse, what is it called? Joe by, the beauty standards. Oh no, it was in the other class, I thought. Yeah. Say it again. Bio show. There you go. Thank you for the time. Okay. So she mentioned this bio show, and she says, well, look, I think I am happy with how I look with my six-pack. She does this typical pose to show off the six-packs in the shadow there. And she says, hope no one will ask me to be thinner anymore. After all, my appearance is mainly for pleasing myself and perhaps please my husband. But the fact that she even mentioned this, she knows that the kind of in identity that she's showing may not be mainstream, but that's okay for her because she's being independent. She likes it and she hopes to please her husband. So that was a theme we see a lot. Women commenting about others not being able to control them. Now, secondly, and for this, it's such a long post that I couldn't paste it in here. I'm sure you will tell me when I go wrong in my fantastic translation of this. I was editing the details of an interview of a collaboration project. There was a question, Ashley, why did you say be a person who has the right to choose in your video? Was there a time where you had where there was no choice for you? I pondered. Of course, I experienced many times that I didn't have the right to choose. I'm not a trust fund kid, neither was I born with many skills. My appearance is not the school babe type, and I do not have a natural bikini model type of body. When I faced no choice, I didn't even know I wasn't happy because I had no choice. Wow, there's a lot of choice, isn't it? But can you tell me, what is she choosing? What choice? Yeah, it's just choice in on itself. In CDA, we call this nominalization. I'll come back to this. So here, choice is related to Western notions of individualism. It's a fundamental component of consumerism. In capitalism, you have a choice as a consumer. You're not a citizen, you're a consumer, and you can choose what product you want to buy. Okay, so free choice and the right to self-determine for business and individuals both become core moral values. So it's not just, you know, it's a way of living. It's having good moral to be able to have choice. But we don't know what she's choosing or what this choice really is. So nominalization in CDA is when you have a noun like a choice, but then you can talk about it without saying what the subject of the verb is. So it just becomes a thing that doesn't mean to be explained. And here, choice means being happy. Choice means that you're good. Then I had choice. Okay, so we found a lot of that choosing, that self-determination, but also self-management. Self-management, as this lady says, she talks about, you know, the child goes back to school and then says, oh, my mom looks better than yours. So she said, the talk I see the most recently during the new term, only after experiencing the hard work of being a mother, one, can understand the role of being a mummy is the most tiring. Mother's love is mighty devoted to children, but don't give up on yourself. Mummy can seasonably plan pieces of fragmented time, manage your own image. Wow, that's a lot of managing, isn't it? Project managing. Parents are also children's best teacher. Parents' words and deeds constantly influence children. Self-discipline and confidence can give a baby a better environment of growing up. Interestingly, the father is absent in this, yeah? As a participant, it's just her. And she, you know, it's important for her to systematically manage all parts of our life. And that way she'll be successful. And there's a lot of hip out. In fact, if you go like this, you look extra slim. There's interesting choices, poses there. But also for a mom, she has a lot of pressure, you know, it sounds quite intensive. She's negotiating modern and traditional roles here, all in one. But because of the way she's talking about this, the way she presents this, is that she's actually project managing. Everything is a new little project. And it's all about, you know, as long as you're in control, you can be successful. You know, fitness becomes a project, education, motherhood, all of it, little projects. So managing the self, we find again and again. Now, here's this one back. She was, as I said, these are just representative examples. Okay. So like management, we need to strive in all domains of life. That is what is being presented here in these kinds of posts as a theme, as a route to success. It tends to create a collective we, and thus we understand yourself objectively and rationally. And you should be self-reliant as well. You should know yourself. You should understand yourself. Do you understand yourself? Do you know yourself? I'm not sure if I do. What is there to know? You know, really. So the kind of self that is being presented here is what Abramovitz, and Zelnick in literature refer to as the entrepreneurial self. yourself is a project and you're constantly working at yourself to improve, to push through your limits to become better. But it totally ignores unequal opportunities as that. So we can all be, everyone here, you're all now not reliant on the government anymore to do things for you or to provide welfare. Forget that. You're all now your own little management project. And it's up to you if you make a success of your life. Yeah. If you don't, then you don't have the right attitude. Okay. So you're telling me that I get the same chances as the lady outside who's cleaning the garbage. Do we get the same chances? Doesn't matter. We're going to ignore that. That is what this kind of discourse says. You know, it's presented as something very confident as well. There's a lot of use of the indicative and imperative moods. So these things are presented as facts. We don't talk about unequal opportunities. Everyone has the right, the same kind of chance at success. Very confident. Now, self-discipline that she mentions as well is very valued in Confucianism, right? There's a lot of self-discipline as well. It's good, you have to be disciplined. But here it becomes colonized as a kind of freedom of choice and empowerment. So it's not about self-discipline as a kind of obligation to other people. Rather, it's a kind of individual interest here. It's neoliberal kind of looking after your own interests. Individualism is typical from the West as well. So striving. Now, if we, oh yes, sorry, there's also, of course, the consuming of Western products. Here we see, oh, I don't know what she's called. I should have put that in my notes. Can you see her name? Yeah. What's her name? Okay, her. So, thank you. She's gone to the Vogue Cafe, right? Now, she's kind of mentioning this Vogue Cafe. That is not a coincidence. She's selected to go to the Vogue Cafe because it's Western. It's a brand. And also the way she uses language here. She talks about appetizers, for example, which is typical for Western kind of dining habits. The choices she makes in consumption here are all overtly referencing Western products and accessories. I think, what was it? The sweater is from COS and something else is from Base Range. And of course, she's flogging these products, she's selling them, but she's also signaling the kind of cultural capital that she has. The consumption, especially of Western products, is here a marker of status for her, and it's carving out her identity amongst, you know, as she is an emerging Chinese middle-class person. We see this come back again and again in the, okay, I'm going to close the window, excuse me. Okay, so we see this come back and again in our data of people showing kind of products or saying, oh, I look so beautiful in my cup of coffee, and then like, oh, and my watch, by the way. So these women can communicate empowerment, modernity, and good taste through their consumer choices. So there, that rounds it up. Now, in conclusion, what were the findings here? Now we go back to what we said all the way at the beginning, right? We first look for the participants. Well, actually, there's quite few participants, we could say. You know, there's the influencers, of course, themselves. And then sometimes a child is mentioned. Husbands are mostly absent, you know, and families are there as a kind of vague reference, but they don't feature. They're never in the pictures. This is all about these women. And they almost appear to be like coming at us in a vacuum. There's no work that they have to do. There's no social pressures. They can just strive and be beautiful and stretch in the morning sunlight like there's no rabbit cages to be cleaned or there's no dogs to be walked. I'm just talking about myself here. Yes, we now have a rabbit and a dog. So the people who may provide the restrictions on their choices like children and so on, or work, with whom they may have conflicts about whether they can be free and independent and modern, have these modern identities, they're actually not represented here. They're just pushed to the side. This is silenced in these kind of models of the world. And if there's another participant, it's just, you know, yeah, a person who has the right to choose, that featured as well. But mainly it was just the influencers themselves. Now, secondly, what are participants doing, right? Well, here they're making choices, though we didn't find out what exactly they were making choices about. It was just about having choice. And they're managing things. They're managing themselves, their work, their leisure, their children, their fashion, their looks, all of that as a project. There was an absolute absence of where contradictions or clashes or stress may lie in this situation. At what point can't you go running in the morning? At what point can't you just wear, you know, something that shows half your bottom? There was a lack of detail there. Huh? Rather, the focus here, what was evaluated as good, was having choice and striving. Those were the things we aim for and we value. But as things in and of themselves, rather than concrete outcomes, this is what you have to do. That's evaluated as good. That's the identity people want through these actions, which are non-actions in a way. And enjoying Western type commodities, we also found. So really what we are seeing here is a model. It's a model for a successful life for us women. Oh, but CDA then reveals that it is more about an attitude of rejecting being controlled, or at least fantasizing about this, carried in a style of positive can-do language. You know, when we see something that may clash with them, they just say, huh, but I can do this. I am independent. I am striving. I've got everything under control. Now, if you don't, once again, make a contribution to literature, you don't actually have a point to your research project. So that's what we're going to do here as well. And we were able to because we started from the literature, right? If you just do an analysis and you say, ha, there, that's what's here. Well, very good, but so what? What is the importance of what have we now learned? We've learned something about this bit of data, but now we have to say, this is what we now know more of the world. So in a way, we are all building knowledge about our societies together, and you're contributing. Scholars have been interested in how Western ideas and values interact with more traditional ones in China. The analysis suggests that the discipline of Confucianism here becomes transferred to the striving and commitment of neoliberalism. So what is this? This is typical for this struggle, right? Shifting discourses, shifting ideology. Have I run out of time almost? How long have I been going? It's all a blur. Oh, no. It's 5:20. Oh, good timing. Okay, right, great. So choice and self-focus then become almost over-determined as the women seek to find a way in the merging of two sets of values. Yeah, it's so we see this struggle actually taking place where there are competing discourses. On the one hand, they say, oh yeah, so my family is expecting certain things of me, but I want to do this, for example. Oh, the children are going to school and people are talking, but I want to do this. Oh, the beauty of the beauty ideal in society is Bai Shou Mei. Huh? Yeah, that one. Or, but I'm going to do this because I like it and I'm independent. So we see almost a struggle taking place here between choice self-focus, between, you know, neoliberalism and Confucian ideas. But for followers and people in the real world, we're outside of this and we're watching these girls and we feel, yeah, we want to be pretty. I mean, I want to have that six pack, right? But actually it provides very little practical help for me or for other women. The feed provide little in practical terms to allow us to actual resources to understand and discuss this situation because it's being sidelined, it's being deleted. What we get here is a highly polished, almost faked, people would say faked world, where they can be striving, where you can be successful, where you speak in go-getting language, but without actually providing the details or being honest even about maybe the stress you are experiencing. So whereas, yes, it's great that we see and we feel maybe inspired, but on the other hand, it's not really helpful. Now, this was the end. However, we still have time, so I will leave it up to you. I could say an audience is online as well if they want to see another very short 2 slides is all I have left. Example of this where I looked on Weibo for parenting, or how women talked about parenting, and it kind of shows how this fits into an article. But you know, tell me, I will wait now for you to speak and go like, yeah, or like, no, God, please let us go. Who wants to go to the canteen? Or who wants to hear more? Up to you. Oh, you're not going to say anything because you're being respectful. Dang it. It's really difficult about Chinese students. They never say anything. They're like, well, okay, I will do the slides then, but they're brief. All right. So this is an example of an article layout, and it's about intensive parenting on Weibo. It's brief. So the data set here was, of course, social media posts. The overall concern, again, I didn't start from the data. I went to the data afterwards. I started from a concern with how people speak about things online, and especially health communication. I mean, now, if you don't feel well or someone has a rash or something, what are you going to do? You go online, right? You try and figure it out. I used to ask my mom, and I always thought my mom knew everything. I was so wrong. But anyway, now we ask the internet. So if you're in health communication, this is very scary because there's a lot of nonsense online. And this we see as well on topics of, for example, parenting. Yeah. So the concern here was the quality of online debate and the nature of communication on a platform such as Weibo. The topic then was parenting influencers. So yes, the influencers return, but now they're talking about raising children. So the abstract goes in this paper, we use multimodal critical discourse analysis. We haven't talked about that yet. Multimodal means that you will actually not just look at language use, but also consider visual language use. After all, visual communication takes place in every image that we see, but we are so fast in decoding them and reading them that we don't even see the way we're being addressed, if you will, but it is addressing us. So multimodality brings it in. You can also look at memes. You can also look at videos and pictures, which everyone and their auntie is posting. So we use MCDA to look at the posts of influencers using parenting hashtags on Chinese Weibo. It has been observed that motherhood more widely has become a site of discursive tension, so that's in the literature, often played out online. In this case, we find such tension between former, more confusion roles of motherhood related to duty and knowing one's place, and the more recently arrived influences of neoliberalism. On the one hand, the hashtag provides a sense of community for stay-at-home moms who have given up their careers often. But on the other, the influencers configure this duty and obligation to something based on striving, individual success, and self-management. I think you see some things coming back, right? So different set of data, and we found some of the same kind of signs. Now you could say, that's because it's your reading, but I think I addressed that, didn't I, last time? Yeah, I addressed that when I said, linguists often say that CDA is one's own view, but nothing less, nothing about that, because we actually contextualize our, our texts that we analyze, and we also, are guided by literature. That's why looking into literature beforehand is so important. So they appear to play a role in helping this ideology enter into the family. Whenever we found something, it was linked to literature. It's not just my reading. It's actually me building myself upon existing literature and contributing to that. So in the introduction, what did I say? We introduced the topic. I say social media fits into that. Oh, typo, sorry again. According to what the literature points out. So I read about motherhood and that there's discursive tension, that mothers exchange a lot of information online. Health professionals are worried about this because what if you have an influencer who has a lot of followers, sometimes 1 million people, like their post, but then they come with what is sometimes really poor information. So that is something we can concern about. And discourse studies can then be useful for shifting discourses. What is DS? Oh, yes, probably CDA. Can be useful regarding the shifting discourses on motherhood to map these out and to understand the kind of ideology in everyday social media content that we're finding. So then we say in this paper, we say the data, we say the method, and we say the angle. Looked at 400 posts, used MCDA, and looked at popular influencers on Weibo, and then talked about the findings. So your introduction kind of lays out the entire path. And then you signpost what's saying, what are we going to do next? Next, we're going to look at the literature review. So this is an article way at the end of the study. This is not exactly how the study comes about, but we've seen that before in an example. The literature review then looked at motherhood in China. It said that there was a lot of Confucianism with duty, also policy, of course, of having the one child, and that there was a lot of women who felt tension between, you know, being modern now and going out and getting a career, but they still have these home responsibilities, which isn't easy. There was also literature reviewed on neoliberal mothering, where we see an intensification of duty, and there's a sense of responsibility, which isn't just, I love my child, I'm going to take care of it. It was more so about, I have to prepare my child for the outside world. It has to compete against all the other children. Let's do more after school activities, yeah? So that their whole thing is booked up and they go to sleep completely exhausted, no free time. There was also the idea of risk society, where we want to kind of really protect the child. So, you know, because you never know what could happen. There's all kinds of risks out there. Didn't used to be like that. You know, I think my husband is from a different generation than I am, but only like about 10 years. And they were just, he went off and apparently for 6 months he camped out in the forest or something when he was 16. How did those parents allow that, right? No, it was okay for that time. When I was young, my mom just shoved me off into, no screens, of course, no computers, shoved me off into a garden. And I spent hours and hours in this garden with other children. So it was more protected already. But now I can't imagine telling my children, oh, just shove off, outside you go, you know, just go around the community. Anyway, so risk society sees society as changing and as parents becoming more kind of, you know, we have to manage these children. And finally, we also looked at influencers. Influencers in literature have been described as experts because they present knowledge, but they couple this to a kind of authenticity, you know, because that's why we like influencers, right? They're not just celebrities. They're like the person next door, and they represent success stories. So it's very neoliberalist. And the kind of responsibility they carry is also that, if you will, their authority is based on taste and cultural. The methodology was then discussed. We say, what is the data? How is it collected according to this and that example? And other people who have done this before. And the sampling was in 2 phases, following blah, blah, blah. Then we say, we applied MCDA. What is it? And who has done major methodological developing. Yeah, so because it has to be up to date. And then we introduce some additional important concepts such as discourse. You at least have to explain this so everyone can come to your article, even if they're not discourse analysts. They can know what it is just because you kind of run through the basics, if you will. Also discursive scripts, what is that? Then we signpost again because you have to prepare the reader for what is coming. So he said, well, the analysis is organized around participants, so their actions, so agents are participants, their actions, the objects, the settings, and the we of the community. And then we had to include, after revision of this article, a bit about translation and ethics. The analysis then, we're almost there, don't faint of boredom, please. The analysis then was organized according to different strands of findings and how they tie into the so what, if you will, of the conclusion. What we found, see, it's really brief. What we found was that these mothers were being really strategic, yeah? They weren't teaching their children chores. I mean, I tell my children, go do the dishes. No, they would describe it as, my little Momo can now roll up the, yoga mat and stuff. So in my time, these would have been chores, but for them, they were skills, making these children more ready, yeah? And more ready to compete against others because they can now do this and that and that. And they also provided very empty yet strategic sounding advice, like, I have a daily schedule for little something else, and it is very important to have this. But then they never say why it is very important to have a daily kind of regimented schedule. But it all boils down to competition and neoliberalism. We also find these mothers rather acting alone in a vacuum. Yeah, okay, they're staying at home because they're doing the Confucian kind of responsibility there, but they do feel empowered by sharing this. And it's also a very kind of visual world. We see a lot of beautiful but strangely empty rooms. I mean, oh my goodness, if I were to show the rooms of my children, it would be clutter everywhere and pictures that are really bad on the, which I would never say to my children, on the walls and all of that. And we didn't see that there. It was all beautiful. It was manicured even. It was like a design room on Taobao or something, we've all seen them. So that kind of visual world of lifestyle and aspiration was very much decontextualized. It didn't really look real, but it was supporting their claim to being a success and to having this expertise. What we found was authentic experts. These influencers shone through their kind of striving, their way of communicating their authenticity. And, we found a lot of isolation of mothers saying, yes, it's a lot of stress now. I've given up my work and I'm alone at home, but I do this so little Wei can now, do this or that. So of course, it didn't come out like this. It did come out like this in the article, but when I first did the analysis, there was a lot of redrafting, there was rejigging because, I was working through it as I went along. So you never just go, blah, this is the analysis done. An analysis goes through many, many iterations of kind of getting things right. And then finally, the conclusion. There we didn't just summarize or recap what we found. We reinstated the problematization of the intro. Hey, this is what we found in the literature. Let's now look what is therefore in connection to these mothers. Yeah, we then repeated the strands of the analysis in connection to the larger importance, i.e. the literature regarding health communications, influencers, and the underlying ideologies in Chinese society. So that was an article based on something, kind of related to the fitness girls. And the end, again, but now for real. What's my timing? Huh? They told me something. Oh, thank you, yes. Thank you. Sorry, did I do okay for time? Aha, that's great. Okay. If you say so, then I'm happy with that. Right, are there any questions or shall we all go to the canteen? You can ask questions, but canteen is good. He's ready to go to the canteen. He's like, oh, canteen, yeah. Okay, canteen, go on, lead the way. All right, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for following online as well. I hope it was interesting. You can go have some food. Oh, wait. Is there questions? Oh.
I go in there some questions in the chat box.
Yes, I'll look at the chat box now. Okay, in the Abdul group. Okay. Okay, bye-bye. I'm skipping the stuff in Chinese because I can't read it, sadly. Thank you, you're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Can the two analyzers deal with Chinese and Afsa? Oh, okay, go down. Thank you. Afsa, okay, this is different. Good. Oh, can you recommend any references paralleling this lecture? Is this lower? Okay. Lower. Professor Bemoulier, thanks for your fantastic. You're welcome. May I ask, how can we differentiate doing discourse analysis critically from CDA? Well, it's always critical. That's why it's called critical discourse analysis. Some scholars argue that the difference lies in the agenda CDA holds, i.e. call for change. It definitely has an interest in addressing, injustices in society. And the whole point of being critical is to see in whose interest that these discourses are that are being drawn on. I'm wondering, how can we reflect this agenda when doing CDA? Well, that's all you do with CDA. Just like here when pointing out the struggles between Confucianism and neoliberalism, the interest here is in consumer society becoming more and more into the lives of many people here where it wasn't like this before. Let's see if I can give another example. Gosh, no, I've been talking for quite a while and my brain has gone too putty. But basically, if you look at my work every time that I use CDA, I will try to point out what the discourses are. And then we ask, well, in whose interest are them, because that is what you do when you do CDA. In this case, it's this neoliberal kind of pushing in where we are no longer treated as citizens or even people. We're now consumers who can buy products and who can spend money. And more, this is kind of pushing. That's the danger, perhaps, of capitalism. Professor, did you translate all the Weibo posts into English? All 5,000 posts? Ha ha ha. I didn't do this on my own. I had someone else who translated all 5,000 posts. Yes. Did I mention that there's a lot of graft, basically, a lot of work that goes in this? Of course, we, not for me, we didn't translate all of those. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll. My co-author did this because she speaks Chinese. See? And then I read them and read them. So, could you please give more details about the data analysis? How did you analyze the 5,000 posts through Envivo? Yeah, that was the translated bit as well. But as I said, I worked with someone who did that part. And get these results? No. Envivo allows you to show that there are certain things being said, but the themes you still have to tease out yourself. So what you do is you start to read them and you read them and you read them until you see that there's certain things coming back. I did this together with someone who's Chinese language, and she said, oh, look at these. These are things that are said a lot. And then we looked again, we did this together, we sat down and we read and we read and we read. And she says, this is saying that, that is saying that. And through this, eventually you see the same things being said again and again and again. Dear Professor Rivier, as for Van Dijk CDA, how do we understand cognition as the bridge for discourse to society? And how do macro structures help with CDA? And how do we come to convincing schemata with analysis of examples? Well, that's very good, but that's not exactly what I did here. I used it as a very, very simple way. As I said, all I was trying to say here is that you can use this to tease out big themes, actually. It's almost like a thematic analysis. All that the macrosemantic analysis does in this case is, it's just, you can choose. You don't have to follow by the letter what other people have written or what other people have said. I took what I needed from that. Because of my background in media and communications, we learn to use the tools in a way that we see we need them to apply them successfully. It's not about a demonstration of how I'm doing a tool and I'm going to go very deep into this or do exactly what that other is. I just use the tool to tease out what I need. For me, all I needed was to see themes, things that people said, the kind of elements that people then used again in different combinations, if you will. Professor, thank you very much for your lecture. It's really impressive. That's kind of you. Thank you. If you could just check the chat box. Yes, I'm doing it now. Lecture from, thank you. Oh, that's so kind of you. Okay, wonderful. Well, I hope that I've answered some of these questions to some extent. Really, it's, I would advise you to try it. And